Charlottesville, Virginia, this October. At the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library, the silence was as steady as ever. It was a crisp autumn day, sunlight filtering through tall windows and casting warm shadows over shelves thick with the scent of old paper and binding glue. In the West Wing, Hannah Whitmore, 45, moved methodically along the rows, shelving books with the practiced rhythm of someone who had done this for decades. Her hair now carried faint streaks of silver, but her hands moved with the same certainty they had for 20 years. The library wasn't just her workplace. It was her refuge, her quiet sanctuary through the unspeakable loss that had defined her life, the disappearance of her daughter. 18 years ago, her nearly 2-year-old daughter, Ava Whitmore, was abducted from daycare. No one knew what happened. The woman trusted to care for her vanished and was later found dead. Ava was never seen again. Hannah's world collapsed. Her marriage crumbled. She refused to leave Charlottesville, convinced that if Ava ever came back, or if there was ever a breakthrough, she had to be there. And then, on a morning like any other, while processing a routine shipment of magazines, she saw the face. The new issue of Vogue, October edition, sat at the top of the pile. On the cover was a young woman standing in a sunlit field, turned slightly toward the camera, wearing an off-shoulder blouse and faded jeans. Her hair was loosely tied, her gaze soft, but what stopped Hannah cold wasn't the girl's pose. It was the birthmark, a soft purple hue, lotus-shaped, curling around the outer edge of her left eye, identical to the mark Ava had since birth. The one Hannah had kissed every night. The one she'd described to detectives, artists, journalists, and strangers alike for almost 2 decades. Her fingers trembling, Hannah flipped through the glossy pages. On page 32, she found it, a feature titled "Hands That Grow America," a photo essay on rural farm workers. And there she was again, this time mid-task, caught in a candid moment. Sleeves rolled, straw in her hair. The same sun-glinting strands of light brown that Hannah had seen in her own mirror for years. The caption read, "Emily Emmy Reeves, 20, working at Blackridge Farm, Nelson County." Ava would be 20. Hannah's legs nearly gave out. Her heart pounded like a trapped bird. She clutched the magazine, too stunned to speak, already knowing, deep in her bones, that she had just found her daughter. 18 years ago, Charlottesville, Virginia. A quiet October afternoon turned into a nightmare Hannah Whitmore would never forget. That day, as usual, Hannah was working in the basement of the Jefferson-Madison Library, sorting archival prints. Cell service was spotty down there, so she'd tucked her phone into her bag, hanging it on a hook by the stacks. She didn't feel the vibration. She didn't see the screen light up. It wasn't until she glanced at the wall clock, 5:17 p.m., that a jolt of panic hit her. "Oh God, Ava," she whispered, grabbing her phone. 3 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from Little Sprouts Daycare. She sprinted to her car, heart thudding for reasons she couldn't yet explain. As she pulled into the parking lot, she slammed the brakes. Police cars were already there. Red and blue lights spun across the playground like sirens from a dream. A toddler was crying inconsolably in the far corner. Hannah jumped out, yelling, "I'm here to pick up my daughter, Ava Whitmore." There must be some mistake. A uniformed officer by the gate stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you Hannah Whitmore?" "Yes, where's Ava?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked her to come inside. Hannah's stomach turned to stone. Inside the building, the staff looked shell-shocked. One teacher was shaking, repeating under her breath, "I only turned around to get a diaper." A week later, the police showed Hannah the surveillance footage from that afternoon. Linda Pledger, a staff member who'd worked at the daycare for nearly 2 years, was seen calmly leading Ava by the hand toward the back gate. No alarm, no struggle. Linda glanced around, then scooped Ava up and slipped her into a silver sedan parked just out of frame. The plates were covered. The car sped off, and Ava was gone. The investigation exploded across the state. Detectives combed through Linda's background, finances, contacts, everything. But just 2 weeks later, her body was discovered in the George Washington National Forest, hanging from a tree. No note, no sign of Ava. The headlines read, "Daycare worker found dead. Likely suicide in ongoing abduction case." Police speculated Linda had handed the child off to someone else, but that trail ended there. Hannah's world shattered. Her husband, Daniel Whitmore, tried to hold on with her, but grief pulled them apart. By year's end, he moved out, carrying the silent wreckage of a father who had lost everything. But Hannah stayed. She stayed in the same house. She stayed in Charlottesville. She stayed in case Ava ever returned, or if a new clue ever surfaced. She rebuilt her life around the quiet routine of library work. And every time a small child entered, bouncing with laughter, tugging a parent's hand, Hannah caught glimpses. A turn of the head, a giggle, a wide-eyed look. But they were only ghosts. Until that day, the day she saw the girl on the magazine cover. Hannah's hands trembled as she turned the pages of the Vogue magazine, eyes locking on the small caption beneath the young woman's photo. Emmy Reeves, 20, at Blackridge Farm, Nelson County. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Ava would be 20 this year too. That birthmark, soft violet, shaped like a lotus flower around the left eye, was unmistakable. She'd recreated it 100 times in her mind, described it to police, forensic artists, journalists, and now it was staring back at her from a fashion magazine cover. She ran from the library, clutching the magazine like it might vanish if she paused even a second longer. This wasn't something to explain over voicemail. She needed the police. She needed to see Detective Ray Holden. At the Charlottesville Police Department, Hannah marched straight to the front desk, her voice strained. "I need to speak to Detective Holden. It's about Ava Whitmore's case." The officer behind the desk looked up, then nodded. "He's here. Please wait inside." A few minutes later, the door opened. Detective Holden stepped in. Compared to 18 years ago, he'd aged significantly, his hair now fully gray, face etched with deep lines. But the look in his eyes was unchanged, steady, compassionate. "Hannah," he said softly, "it's been a long time. I found something." She placed the magazine on the desk and flipped to the cover. "I think I found Ava." Holden paused, then leaned in. His eyes settled on the birthmark. No words were needed. He understood immediately. "We need to verify this." The police quickly contacted Vogue's editorial office. On the other end of the line, a staffer responded with enthusiasm. "Oh, that photo spread received amazing feedback. We shot it at farms throughout Appalachia, wanted to capture real, authentic rural life. Our photographer was Leah Dalton. She's brilliant at capturing spontaneous moments." Detective Holden cut in. "The girl on the cover, Emmy Reeves. Is she a professional model?" "Not at all. Just a farm girl. We were at Blackridge Farm, and she happened to be there helping. Leah said her birthmark made her absolutely mesmerizing." "Do you have the exact address of that farm?" "Not precisely. It's about 10 miles north of Montwell Farm in Nelson County. The owners are Walter and Diane Reeves." Holden nodded. "That's enough to reopen the case. I'll send a team there immediately." Hannah stood up, urgent. "I'm going with them." "Hannah?" Holden hesitated. "You need to prepare yourself. If that really is Ava, she's lived an entirely different life. She may not remember you." Hannah looked him in the eye. "I've waited 18 years. I'm not waiting another day." 30 minutes later, Hannah was on the road with Officers Bennett and Martinez. She followed in her own car, bringing with her a small box she'd kept for nearly 2 decades, Ava's pink baby shoes, a threadbare stuffed bear, and a photo album without an ending. They left Charlottesville, heading north through the Blue Ridge. The roads narrowed, woods thickened, the horizon swallowed by autumn trees. Eventually, the GPS chimed. "You have arrived." A weathered wooden sign came into view. Blackridge Farm, established. Bin Doku's, Yuz Sexon Iki what lay ahead was a thriving farm. A 2-story farmhouse, a broad front porch, clean barns, well-kept fences. Not struggling or rundown. This was prosperous land. Hannah pulled in behind the patrol car. 2 people emerged from the porch, Walter and Diane Reeves. Walter was broad-shouldered, his face leathery from sun and years of labor. Diane was petite, graying hair tied back neatly, her expression composed but guarded. Officer Bennett stepped forward, badge visible. "Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, we're here on an urgent matter. This woman, Hannah Whitmore, believes a young woman photographed on your property may be her daughter who went missing 18 years ago." The couple exchanged a brief glance. "You must mean the magazine folks," Diane said slowly. "There was a girl named Emmy, yes. But she only worked one day. Wasn't permanent staff. Who sent her here?" "A man named Rowan. We've had an old labor-sharing arrangement with him." Hannah couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward. "My daughter had a distinctive birthmark around her left eye, just like in the photo. She was taken from daycare in 2007. Diane studied the photograph Hannah handed over. Her expression softened slightly. "I'm very sorry about your daughter, ma'am. Truly, but the girl only worked here that day. Then she left. We haven't seen her since. Do you know where she lives?" "She came from Rowan's farm, but we don't know his address. Just that he lives somewhere up in the mountains." Walter pulled out a scrap of paper. "This is his phone number. It's the only contact we've ever had. Officer Martinez tried calling. No signal, not in any regional registry." Bennett sighed. "We can't go chasing into the mountains with just this. Best option is to regroup, gather more intel, and investigate at first light." Hannah clenched her jaw. She wanted to scream, but logic held her back. They were right. "I'm not going back to Charlottesville. I'll stay nearby tonight. That way, we can start early." As they drove away, Hannah glanced at Blackridge Farm in her rearview mirror. Walter and Diane's eyes, though polite, had something cold beneath them. Too careful, too rehearsed. She knew they were hiding something. Dusk settled over the Blue Ridge as Hannah drove away from Blackridge Farm. The golden light of late afternoon painted long shadows across the winding hills of Nelson County. She wasn't sure where she was headed. Her thoughts spun in loops. The girl in the photo had to be Ava. The birthmark was too exact. But Walter and Diane Reeves had been too calm, too polished. After about 20 minutes, a flickering neon sign appeared on the right side of the road. "Timberline Motel, vacancy." A low, tin-roofed building with fewer than a dozen rooms. Inside the office, a red-haired woman with reading glasses looked up from a paperback novel. She gave Hannah a wary but polite nod. "Can I help you?" I need a room for the night." $29. Comes with cable TV, hot water, and a lock that won't betray you." "I'll take it." The woman extended her hand. "Name's Dottie. I run the place." Hannah filled out the card and handed over cash. As Dottie processed the payment, Hannah's gaze wandered to a bulletin board nearby, covered in flyers for local businesses and events. One photo caught her eye. A rustic tavern, string lights glowing across a wooden deck. She pointed at it. "What's this place?" "Miller's Tavern," Dottie replied. "Right across the road. Comedy night tonight. Whole county shows up. Locals?" "All of them. Farmers, mechanics, truckers. Everyone passes through." Hannah hesitated, then pulled the Vogue magazine from her bag. "Have you ever seen this girl? She might go by Emmy Reeves." Dottie squinted at the image, then shook her head. "Can't say I have. But that birthmark sure is something." "What about a man named Rowan? Owns a farm somewhere up in the hills?" Dottie frowned, thoughtful. "Might have heard it, but can't say for sure. Like I said, everyone winds up at Miller's. If someone knows, it'll be there." That night, Hannah stepped into Miller's Tavern. Just as Dottie described, it was packed. The wooden walls were covered in vintage tools and taxidermy, yellowed photographs, old license plates. The air reeked of fried food and tobacco smoke buried deep in the beams. At the far end, a young man in a flannel shirt delivered punchlines from a makeshift stage. Laughter rippled through the room. Hannah took an empty stool at the bar and ordered a soda. The bartender was a young man in his early 20s, hair tied back, smile easy and genuine. "First time at Miller's?" "Oh, is it that obvious?" "Small town. I know most faces. I'm Brian. My dad owns the place, but I run it most nights." The name stopped Hannah cold. "Brian Pledger." She hesitated, but masked her reaction. "I'm Hannah. Not from around here, are you?" "Charlottesville. I'm looking for someone. Brian tilted his head, curious. Anyone I might know? Hannah took a breath. My daughter. She was abducted from daycare 18 years ago. I've never found her. Brian's smile faded. His expression shifted to genuine concern. I'm sorry. That's awful. Hannah nodded, then added, I think I have a lead. A young woman appeared in a fashion magazine recently. Same birthmark. The photo was taken at Blackridge Farm nearby. Brian's face changed slightly. Subtle tension around the eyes, his jaw tightening, just enough to notice. The Reeves? He asked. They don't come in much. Keep to themselves. The girl's name is Emmy Reeves. They claimed she was a day laborer sent by someone named Rowan. Brian paused. His eyes drifted, guarded now. My mom worked at a daycare, he said quietly, almost to himself, before she died. Hannah's chest tightened. Where? Asheville. But I was young when she died. My dad raised me after that. She swallowed. What was her name? He looked up slowly. Linda. Linda Pledger. It hit Hannah like a punch to the gut. She braced herself on the bar. Are you okay? Brian asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, she lied. Her voice trembled. She looked behind him, scanning the shelves, and there it was. A framed photo of a woman, half hidden behind whiskey bottles. Linda, just as she remembered her from case files. Brian, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice low but firm. I know who your mother was. What are you talking about? She pulled out her phone, opened an old article with Linda's picture. Your mother was the daycare worker who took my daughter. The security cameras caught her leading Ava out of the daycare. 2 weeks later, she was found dead in the forest. Brian went pale, staring at the screen, then at Hannah, back again. Number. That can't be right. My mom? Dad always said she was a good person. Police believe she took Ava to pay off someone's debt. Then she was murdered to keep her quiet. Brian slumped against the bar, shaken. He ran a hand over his face. Silence stretched between them. Finally he said, I didn't know. I was just a kid. Dad never talked about it. Said it hurt too much. Then something clicked. His eyes widened. Rowan, that's my dad. Rowan Pledger. Hannah stared. The Reeves said they didn't know where he lived. Just had an old number. Brian shook his head and pulled out his phone. I have his current number. He lives about 20 minutes from here. Has a small farm. Not big, but enough. She hesitated. Will you take me there? He met her gaze with surprising resolve. After what my mom did. I need to make it right. I'll take you. Tonight. Night had fully fallen by the time Hannah followed Brian's pickup down the winding back roads. Trees loomed on either side like dark sentinels, and the moon hung high, casting a pale silver glow over the fields of Nelson County. During a long straightaway, Hannah quickly tapped out a text to Detective Holden, sharing her live GPS location and writing, following a lead. Possible location of Rowan Pledger. Might have Ava. The signal was weak, but she prayed it would go through. Soon, they turned onto a dirt path marked by a crooked wooden sign. Pledger Farm. Just before they reached the house, Hannah spotted an old sedan pulling out of the driveway. Brian recognized it immediately and picked up speed, tailing the vehicle from a short distance. It was Rowan's car. After about 10 minutes of weaving through the dark, wooded terrain, the car turned into a clearing. A small, modest farmhouse stood surrounded by a vegetable patch and a few grazing goats behind a wire fence. Rowan's car stopped near the porch, the driver's side door still open. Brian cut the engine and stepped out. Hannah followed, heart pounding. Dad! Brian called out. What are you doing here this late? I went by your house and saw you leaving. Rowan Pledger turned. He was tall, his dark hair streaked with gray, face weathered by age, and a life of bad roads. His eyes flicked from Brian to Hannah. Brian? Who's this woman? Brian stepped forward, shoulders tense. This is Hannah Whitmore. She's looking for her daughter, a daughter who was abducted 18 years ago. By Mom. Rowan froze for a split second. Then his expression hardened. What are you talking about? Your mother never kidnapped anyone. She did, Brian replied. The daycare cameras caught her. She took a little girl named Ava. 2 weeks later, she was found dead in the forest. This woman is Ava's mother. Rowan looked at Hannah. Her gaze was steady. I'm not here to accuse you, she said. I just want to find my daughter. Rowan crossed his arms, jaw tight. I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you even referring to? Some girl on a magazine cover? You've got no proof. Before Hannah could respond, a voice called out from the porch. Rowan? Who's out there? Why haven't you come in? A young woman stepped into the light. Tall, long brown hair, soft features. And as she stepped forward, Hannah's breath caught. There it was, the birthmark. Violet, lotus-shaped. Left eye, it was Ava. Emmy? Hannah whispered. The young woman, Emmy, looked down at them, confused. What's going on? Who are these people? Hannah took a tentative step forward. My name is Hannah Whitmore. I believe I'm your mother. Emmy blinked, stunned. What? Number, that's not possible. My parents are Walter and Diane Reeves. Rowan quickly interjected, voice sharp. Enough! She doesn't have any evidence. Emmy, go back inside. Brian turned to Emmy, voice calm. She described your birthmark in detail, years before anyone ever saw it on that Vogue cover. Emmy instinctively touched the mark on her face. Hannah pulled out her phone, scrolling to an old photo album. She held the screen toward Emmy. Baby pictures, toddler smiles, all with that same unmistakable birthmark. Emmy stared, her face draining of color. I don't understand. I grew up on the farm. I've always lived with Walter and Diane. They're my parents. Hannah spoke gently. They told me you were just a day worker. They denied even knowing you. Emmy's expression shifted. Anger crept in. That's a lie. They raised me, Rowan muttered, clearly frustrated. Damn it, those idiots. Why the hell would they give out my name and number? Brian rounded on him. Dad, what do you know? What did you do? Rowan sighed, rubbing his face. They came to me. Said someone was after her, some creditor. That she wasn't safe. They asked me to keep her here for a few weeks until things blew over. Creditors? Emmy snapped. What creditors? The farm is fine. Brian's voice was quieter, but firm. Mom took Ava to pay off your gambling debts. The police believed that. And when the heat got too close, she was killed. It wasn't suicide. Emmy's knees buckled. She grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. So I'm not Emmy. You're Ava, Hannah whispered, taken from daycare before your 2nd birthday. Rowan stepped forward. This is all insane. No, Emmy shouted. I want the truth. Suddenly, a distant wail of sirens cut through the still night. Blue and red lights shimmered through the trees. Rowan turned sharply. Who called the police? Are you crazy? If the Reeves find out, I've been exposed. Emmy raised her phone, screen lit. I did. She took a breath, voice steady. I'm done running. I want to know who I am. Headlights spilled into the yard. Flashing strobes lit up the farmhouse. The police had arrived. The flashing red and blue lights from the patrol cars bathed the porch of the Pledger farmhouse in uneasy color. Officers stepped out from 2 cruisers, hands resting near their belts, eyes sweeping the dark yard with practiced caution. One officer stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. We received a call regarding a missing person report. Who placed the call? Emmy stepped up. I did, she said. My name is Emmy Reeves. Or, that's what I've always believed. But this woman, she motioned to Hannah, she says I'm her daughter. Abducted 18 years ago. A subtle charge passed through the group of officers. The lead officer glanced at Emmy, then froze briefly on the violet lotus-shaped birthmark around her left eye. You're the missing person from Charlottesville? He asked. Ava Whitmore? Emmy nodded slowly, instinctively touching the mark. Hannah stood nearby, tears brimming, but gaze steady. Another officer stepped back and spoke quietly into his radio. Subject appears to match description in missing child file. Birthmark confirmed. Requesting immediate ID verification. The lead officer turned to Rowan. And you are? Rowan Pledger. I live here. Do you have any knowledge of this young woman's true identity? Rowan tensed. I was just keeping her safe for someone. I didn't abduct anyone. Emmy interjected. Walter and Diane Reeves raised me. Said they were my parents. But she looked at Hannah again. Showed me pictures of a little girl with this exact birthmark. Me. Hannah pulled out her phone and showed baby photos of Ava to the officers. The resemblance was striking. One of them stepped back and reported into his radio. Initial match confirmed. Escalating to state investigators. All parties to be transported for formal statements. At Waynesboro Police Department, an hour later. Hannah sat in a cold, sterile interview room, the fluorescent light above flickering slightly. A plastic cup of water and a blank statement form sat in front of her. A young officer entered, serious-faced, carrying a thick folder. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Officer Delaney. I'll be taking your preliminary statement. Detective Holden from Charlottesville is en route. Thank you. Can you walk me through everything that happened tonight? Hannah began. From the moment she saw the magazine to her visit at Blackridge Farm, meeting the Reeves, finding Brian Pledger at the tavern, discovering his mother was the woman who abducted Ava, and then confronting Rowan. Delaney took notes carefully, pausing only to ask clarifying questions. When she finished, he nodded. Thank you. We've separated Mr. Pledger and the Reeves for questioning. At this point, we have substantial cause to believe that Emmy Reeves is in fact Ava Whitmore, abducted in 2007. Hannah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I see her? She's still with another officer, but she requested to speak with you when she's done. She nodded again and waited. The clock ticked louder in the silence. Every minute dragged like a year. About an hour later, the door opened. Emmy stepped into the waiting room. She looked tired, wearing an old coat, eyes shadowed but alert. She sat beside Hannah, leaving half a step of space between them. They stared at each other for a long moment. 18 years of silence sat between them. Then Emmy spoke first. I don't know how to feel. Everything I thought I knew just unraveled tonight. Hannah nodded slowly. And I never thought I'd find you. Emmy turned to her, eyes softening slightly. I saw myself in the pictures you showed me. The way I smiled. The birthmark. I've always felt different. Now I know why. Hannah's voice was gentle. Your father, Daniel, he called it your lotus mark. He said you were born to be special. Emmy looked down, voice cracking. They told me they adopted me. But there were no papers. They kept me isolated. No social media. Said it was to protect me. But it was to hide me. Hannah reached out, gently taking her hand. Now you have a choice. Whatever you want. I'll respect it. Emmy met her gaze, unwavering. I want the truth. All of it. One piece at a time. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Waynesboro Police Department, casting long beams across tired but resolute faces. Hannah and Emmy sat side by side in the small waiting room, each clutching a paper cup of coffee. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. A uniformed officer entered, accompanied by a technician in a white forensic coat. We'll need to collect DNA samples, just for official confirmation, if you both consent. Emmy nodded first. I want to know. No more guessing. The technician performed a simple cheek swab for both. They were taken into separate rooms to sign consent forms. We'll process this immediately, the technician explained. You'll have results in a few hours. This case is now top priority. Meanwhile, in a separate interview room, Walter and Diane Reeves faced a series of relentless questions. At first, they denied knowing anything about Emmy's real identity. But when detectives presented the photos, testimony, and contact logs with Rowan Pledger, they broke. Diane buried her face in her hands, her voice trembling. We just wanted a child. We couldn't have one. Walter had a record, so every adoption agency turned us down. Walter clenched his fists, staring at the table. A man approached us. Said there was a little girl. The mother couldn't raise her. Said it was safe. No paperwork, no courts, just cash. How much? $50,000. In cash. We didn't ask questions. We didn't want to know. And after that, we moved to the countryside, cut ties, changed her name to Emmy, raised her in isolation. And the photos? Diane's eyes welled with tears. I prayed every year that no one would ever recognize her. In the adjoining room, Rowan Pledger admitted his involvement too, but offered something darker. Linda, my wife, took the girl at the request of a debt collector. I owed them a lot. They said if I didn't pay, I'd lose everything. Linda thought handing over the kid was the only way to protect us. So her death, the hanging, was it really suicide? Rowan stared directly at the detective. No, they killed her. Made it look like a suicide so the cops would stop asking questions. Who were they? Rowan swallowed hard. I don't know the full names, but they're still out there. I'm willing to testify, if I get a deal. Later that afternoon, Detective Ray Holden arrived at the station. Older now, but still sharp-eyed, he met with Hannah and Emmy in a quiet room. The DNA results are in. He laid the report on the table. Hannah held her breath. Emmy Reeves is a 99.999% genetic match for Ava Whitmore. Emmy closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Hannah reached out, grasping her hand. Their fingers locked tightly, the air thick with emotion. Holden continued, Walter and Diane Reeves are being formally charged with kidnapping, falsifying documents, and obstruction of justice. And Rowan? Emmy asked. Her voice was quiet, but steady. He said my mother was murdered for wanting to speak out. We're reopening the Linda Pledger case, Holden confirmed. It was ruled a suicide in 2007. But based on new testimony, we're now treating it as a potential homicide. And the trafficking network. Holden looked at both of them. Rowan has provided what he knows. We're coordinating with federal agencies. If his information is accurate, we may be looking at a trafficking ring that's been operating for decades. Emmy exhaled slowly. So I'm living proof. Holden nodded gently. And maybe the key to dismantling the whole thing. That evening, under a soft, post-rain sky, Hannah and Emmy walked out of the interrogation room together. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The truth had arrived, and it filled every quiet space between them. Emmy turned to Hannah. I want to know about my father. My biological father. Hannah smiled, eyes distant. Daniel lives in Colorado now. He remarried after we divorced. But he never stopped thinking about you. He used to say if there was such a thing as a miracle, one day it would find its way. Emmy nodded. For the first time in days, she smiled, truly smiled. Maybe that miracle just did. 2 days later, the air in Colorado was brisk and cool. Gray clouds drifted over the distant snow-capped peaks. Hannah drove a rental car down a quiet country road near Boulder, her hands steady on the wheel. In the passenger seat, Emmy, now fully aware that she was Ava Whitmore, stared silently out the window, her long hair catching the breeze from the vent. She hadn't said much since they landed, but her eyes were different now. No longer lost, but piecing together something that had always been missing. Hannah pulled into the gravel driveway of a modest 2-story wooden house at the end of a dirt road. The place had a wide front porch and an old porch swing. Out front, a man was mowing the grass. Silver-haired, slightly stooped, but still strong in his movements. Daniel Whitmore. Hannah stepped out first, hesitating. Emmy followed, slower but steady. When Daniel turned around, Hannah spoke softly. Daniel. He looked up. His expression shifted quickly from surprise to confusion, then froze when he saw the young woman behind her. He stopped in his tracks. Emmy stood a few feet away. Her voice was quiet but clear. I'm Ava. Daniel said nothing. His eyes widened, his mouth parted slightly. He let go of the mower, walked forward as if in a dream. Ava? She nodded. I don't remember anything. But Mom found me, and the DNA confirmed it. Daniel stared at her, as though seeing a ghost, or a miracle. Then slowly, gently, he reached out his arms. May I hug you? Emmy hesitated for a breath, then stepped forward and let him embrace her. There were no words, just wind rustling through the trees, and the broken sobs of a father who had lost his daughter and now held her again. Hannah turned away for a moment, wiping tears from her face. That afternoon, the three of them sat at the kitchen table drinking warm tea. Emmy looked around the house, noticing the framed photos. None of herself, of course, but many of Daniel with other children, his new family. "You have other kids?" Daniel nodded. "A son. But no one ever replaced you. I kept your baby shirt for 10 years. I prayed every year you were still out there." Emmy smiled gently. "Do you read Vogue, by any chance?" Daniel chuckled. "Number. But maybe I will now." That evening, Emmy called Hannah outside. They sat on the old porch swing together, Emmy's hands laced in her lap. "Mom," she smiled faintly. "There. I said it. I think I want to stay here a few weeks. Get to know Dad. Learn where I come from." Hannah nodded. "I won't pressure you to do anything. But I'm glad you said that. And then maybe you and I can go back to Charlottesville. Together." Hannah gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "We have all the time in the world to rebuild." Emmy leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. For the first time in 18 years, she rested against someone who shared her blood. No more lies, no more hiding. No more shame. Just two women under an autumn sky beginning again. 2 weeks later, at the Nelson County Courthouse, the wooden benches were filled. Journalists, local residents, child welfare representatives, even some who had once handed out missing person flyers for Ava. On the right side of the courtroom, Hannah and Emmy sat side by side, hands clasped tightly. Emmy wore a simple white blouse, her hair tied back, her face calm but unflinching. Walter and Diane Reeves entered through the side door, dressed in pale orange prison uniforms, hands cuffed. They didn't look at Emmy, but she looked at them, not with hatred, but with a quiet, controlled gaze. The judge banged the gavel. Court was in session. The prosecution read the charges. Child abduction. Falsification of birth certificates and medical records. Obstruction of a federal investigation. Unlawful custodial interference spanning 18 years. Defense attorneys for Walter and Diane requested a plea deal, citing emotional motivation, a desperate desire for a child, and arguing that Emmy was raised in a safe, nurturing home. The prosecutor replied sharply, "Raising a child on lies is not love. Stealing a child, changing her name, isolating her from the world, that is a form of psychological captivity. And the result is 18 years of stolen identity." The courtroom fell silent. After closing arguments, the judge allowed Emmy to deliver a victim impact statement. She stood, voice steady and clear. "I lived 20 years believing I was someone else. I cared for Walter and Diane. They were all I knew. But real love doesn't come from deception. I'm not angry, but I can't forgive them. They took my past. They nearly took my future. I'll spend the rest of my life rebuilding what they stole. But at least now, I get to begin from a place of truth." The judge delivered the sentence. Walter Reeves, 18 years in prison. Diane Reeves, 15 years, with potential for early release due to cooperation. Outside the courthouse, reporters pressed for a statement. Emmy offered only one line. This wasn't about putting someone in prison. It was about justice for the little girl named Ava Whitmore, the one the world forgot. Meanwhile, Rowan Pledger remained in federal custody, cooperating with the FBI in exposing a multi-state trafficking network spanning from North Carolina to Ohio. Over a dozen arrests had been made based on his testimony. Though he still faced charges for withholding information, prosecutors were actively reviewing terms for a reduced sentence. His son Brian refused all contact. That evening, Hannah and Emmy returned to Charlottesville, back to the old house, the one where Hannah had left a child's bedroom untouched for nearly 20 years. Emmy stepped inside it for the first time. She touched a small framed sign that read, "Ava, you are loved." "Always," she whispered. "I'm home now, Mom." Hannah wrapped her arms around her. She didn't need to say anything. 1 year later, the skies over Charlottesville were still and quiet. Golden leaves scattered across the lawn behind the public library, and children laughed as they played tag near the stone benches beside the Mark Twain statue. Emmy, now officially using her real name, Ava Whitmore, sat at the front desk of the library where her mother had worked for 2 decades. She wore a soft cream sweater, a new staff badge clipped to her chest, her hair tied low, eyes tracking a group of school children heading toward the children's section. At 21, Ava was completing her final year at the University of Virginia, majoring in psychology, focusing specifically on trauma counseling for abducted and abused youth. She had made her decision. Her second life would be about helping others find their way back from the dark. One Saturday morning, Hannah brought in a stack of new magazines. Ava immediately spotted the latest cover of People magazine, displayed prominently. The girl on the cover, from abduction to advocacy, Ava Whitmore speaks out. Her face graced the cover. No longer the anonymous model in a field, but a composed young woman holding a case file, standing in a therapy room. Ava chuckled. "Mom, remember when you hated this magazine? Now, I'm all over the checkout aisle." Hannah laughed, kissing her daughter's hair. "If it's you being yourself, I'll buy every copy on the rack." That evening, Ava sat at her desk and typed on an old typewriter, a gift from Daniel, her father, the same one he had once used to write adoption requests when he didn't yet know he'd lose her. She typed slowly, each word deliberate. "My name is Ava Whitmore. I was stolen from my own life, but I survived long enough to come home. I had a childhood that wasn't mine, a name that wasn't mine, a family that wasn't really a family. And then, one day, a woman saw me on the cover of a magazine, and she never stopped looking. Now, I have two families. A mother who waited for me through unbearable grief, a father who never gave up hope, and a new self, learning how to forgive what came before." At the bottom of the page, she typed, "Not every child who's taken makes it back. But if you're still searching, don't stop. Somewhere out there, that child might be waiting for someone to say their real name." The next day, Ava stood in front of a freshman criminology class, telling her story. When she reached the part about the lotus-shaped birthmark, the room fell completely silent. A student raised his hand. "Do you hate them? Walter, Diane, Rowan?" Ava gave a small, calm smile. "I hate the fear that made them choose what they did. But hate won't make me stronger. I choose truth. And I choose to keep living." That evening, she came home and hugged her mother tightly. And for the first time in 19 years, when Ava entered her bedroom, the one that still held her old pink stuffed bear, she turned out the light and slept. No nightmares, no fractured memories. Only peace and a new chapter already being written.